All right, welcome back. I hope everyone's had a good time so far. We are at our third final speaker before we get to our panelists, the one and only Preston Dennett, who has written 17 books, MUFON investigator of 28 years, and a good friend of mine, and happened to be my co-host in radio in 2013. Everyone give a big round of applause to Preston Dennett.
Thank you, guys.
Well, I say, you've written 17 books. So before we dive into UFO healings, let's get some background on what inspired you and who inspired you and basically everything that brought you to where you are today.
All right. Well, it started actually with sighting on the news. I was very skeptical of UFOs, didn't believe it for a second, but found out, talking about this sighting on the news, that people in my family, my coworkers, my friends had all had dramatic encounters. So these are people I knew and trusted for years who were keeping their experiences secret. And it really changed my world. It hit me like a ton of bricks. It was not good news. I had to reevaluate everything and basically found out UFOs were real. I was dragged into this field kicking and screaming. It was not something I really wanted to follow at all. But I had to follow the evidence. I was shocked. I could not believe our planet was being invaded by aliens, and no one was talking about it. So yeah, I wrote a series of books, quite a number of them actually.
My favorite.
And
anyone who lives in California, if you have not read UFOs over California, highly recommended.
So yeah, it just snowballed from there, I'm showing no signs of stopping. I love this subject. I think it has the potential to change the world, and I think it's one of the most important things we have going on today.
It truly is. And now, because you talked about UFO healings, we heard from the other side about the Great Deception coming. And as you know, after World War II, we had the golden age of UFOs. A lot of people attribute it to our detonation of the first nuclear bomb at the Trinity site in Mexico. Why are we continually having this rise? I mean, we've been hearing disclosure or openness with aliens since 60s, 70s. I remember hearing in the 80s, thinking it was going to happen then the 50th anniversary of Roswell. Here we are in 2015, and we get the same crap, the same CIA saying, oh, it's all our misguided people or our craft being caught on camera. You're getting the same ridicule that you've been getting.
Right. Well, I think the evidence shows that UFOs have been around for thousands of years. But yeah, starting in 1947, coinciding pretty much exactly with the atomic age, which I think a lot of researchers have noticed, they came in very large numbers. It's unprecedented in world history. We have nothing like this, and they came in very large numbers and haven't gone away. And when I got involved in the UFO field in the late 1980s, there was rumors of disclosure then, and they've continued pretty steadily, but it's trending towards that. I don't think the UFOs are going to go away. We're seeing more and more whistleblowers. It's becoming more and more mainstream. I think the subject is now on the verge of exploding into the mainstream. And we have things like the Phoenix Lights or the Gulf Breeze Wave or the Topanga Canyon Wave, these huge waves of sightings which are really, I'm going to say they're publicity campaign on the part of the ETs. So they're trying to make themselves known. I think they know better than to just land on the White House lawn and upset our culture completely. So they're doing a kind of grassroots campaign. At least that's what it looks like to me.
But maybe we need that. Maybe we need them to land on the White House lawn.
Well, I'm not sure that's going to solve our problems. I mean, we know what happens when a technologically advanced culture meets up with one that's not as advanced. It gets absorbed. So it wouldn't necessarily be for the best news for humanity. I think they're trying to help us along as best as they can without directly intervening.
Now, just before you heard L.A. Marzulli talking about the coming Great Deception.
Right.
What's your take on that?
It's hard for me to say. I think that a lot of the people who are taken on board UFOs have a lot to say about upcoming events. When someone's taken on board, the most common thing that they report is being physically examined. But following that, they're given messages of various types, which usually fall into different categories, such as alternative energy sources. Many people are shown the engine rooms and given ideas about how to build free energy machines. Others are told about healing. A great many are given warnings, prophecies of upcoming disasters, warnings about nuclear proliferation, things like this. I think that's what the ETs are mostly worried about. There's a lot of talk about big changes on our planet, maybe moving into the fifth dimension and other things like that, which are, frankly, hard to understand. And so I don't know. I think we are coming in for changes. As far as the big deception, I don't know.
If these people are being told things and shown free energy devices or technology that could help us, or told good things that can help the human race, why are these abductees then told they're not going to remember?
Well, this seems to be something that is pretty universal, actually, this memory problem. It's hard to answer. But there are various possibilities, various explanations, but you're falling in the realm of speculation here, which is something I try to avoid. I think to a certain extent they are trying to cover their tracks. It's also been raised that they're trying to protect the witness from, too much trauma all at once. It's hard to say. Some people do never remember their abductions, probably never even know they're abductees. So what do we say about that sort of thing? If they never even know that they've had an experience, why have they had an experience? It's not affecting them in any way, really. Other people remember their experiences naturally, without the use of hypnosis, and are what you would call a conscious abductee.
Conscious recall.
Right. They don't have to go into hypnosis. And you have every degree in between. So I think to a certain extent it does depend on the witness. It depends on the types of ETs people are being contacted by. There's a lot of different factors. So it's a very difficult question to answer.
Let's talk about alien agenda. Some people say that they're all here for their own purposes. They don't care about us because just like we do, we take advantage of species below us. Look what happened in North America when Columbus came here. We pretty much killed off all the Native Americans. What are we doing to frogs? Even though we're using them to study, from a frog's point of view, we're hurting them. So on one level, you have the good part. On the other level, you have the bad part. So what do you think, from all your 3 decades of research, the agenda is?
A very loaded question. We don't know. I think we have reached the point where we've talked to enough people have had experiences where we've got a pretty basic idea of why they're here and what their agenda is. And there's multiple agendas. I think that a lot of the people who are taken on board who have very close encounters, often they'll label the ETs doctors. It does seem very clear that they're interested in human bodies and in reproduction. There does seem to be a lot of evidence supporting the hybridization project, so to speak. So that definitely does seem to be one of their main agendas, but certainly not the only one. I think they've got a lot of agendas. ET behavior falls under the same umbrella as human behavior. Mm-hmm. And by that I mean the things that they're doing are the things that we would do if we were visiting another planet. So we're seeing these craft hover over nuclear power stations, over dams, over mines, over things like this. They're surveying our rockets. Many rocket launches have been observed by these guys. So it appears to a certain extent they're studying humanity. You can put any number of labels on them. Tourists, there does seem to be something to that. I do think that they're very, very interested in humanity. They do seem to have an agenda where they want to raise people's consciousness. This is something that turns up again and again. People who have very close encounters come away from them spiritually transformed. Often they say they're psychic. They can do hands-on healing. A portion of them become channelers. So this is something that's a prominent enough pattern, but it really can't be ignored. For the most part, I think that they're interested in some of the best things about humanity. They're not coming here trying to hurt people. I don't think that's their agenda. We don't have a lot of accounts of what I would call sadistic or Nazi-like behavior on their parts. The worst we get is they're very unfeeling and put some people through emotional testing and things like this. But for the most part, they seem to have benevolent agenda. If they wanted to take over, well, certainly they could have done it a long time ago. Most researchers do agree that they represent a superior technology. They can outfly our jets. They can turn people off at like a light switch. They could do pretty much anything they want, and they're not taking over our planet. We're still here. If they have taken over, it's already been done. Are they walking among us? Probably, I think. But this raises the question is, what is our relationship with these ETs? If they've been interbreeding with us for thousands of years, if some of these ETs look just like us, this raises serious questions about human origins. And did we even really evolve on this planet? And are we the ETs? So that might be part of the reason. Certainly a lot of people who are taken on board are told that, yes, you are one of us, or you are related to us in some way, or you will look like, one day you will look like us. We're us from the future, this sort of thing. So I think the relationship is much closer than a lot of people realize, and that speaks to their agenda.
Okay, here's the $64,000 question. You mentioned benevolent ETs, right? Okay, and obviously there's several cases of human mutilations, people that go into forests and disappear without a trace. Dogs can find where they went and then just gone. And then, of course, you have a book that you wrote, UFO Healings. So if they're healing a certain subsect of the human population, why are they letting healing to things as minor as a cold, to brain tumors? Why are they letting the other large population of people who have been taken die, suffer, murdered, painful diseases? Why are they choosing a small percentage of people and say, we're going to heal you, we're going to save you, and the rest of you, good luck and die?
Right. Right. Well, this speaks to the question of how many healings are there. What I found out is most of the major researchers have come across these types of cases. Gordon Creighton was probably the first person to mention UFO healings. This was back in the 50s. Wasn't talked a lot about, so this subject didn't get a lot of attention. Mm-hmm. But Bud Hopkins, I cornered him at the Triad conference. He says, oh yeah, we get these healings. David Jacobs, John Mack, Edith Fiore. I found that pretty much all the major UFO researchers, Brad Steiger, I don't know who she is.
Yeah, I mean, who's that? Anybody recognize her?
That must be a mistake. No, that's Yvonne. All the major researchers are uncovering these types of cases, which makes me think this is probably a lot more common than people realize. So that being said, there's a lot of spontaneous healings, and a lot of these remissions are probably not credited to ETs. So any numbers of how many healings are taking place is probably vastly underestimated. Why are some people being healed and others not? That is, the million-dollar question.
Yes.
I think the ETs know much better than to give us this technology, because it would be abused. Let's face it. It wouldn't be available to all of us. It's going to go to the military, and they're going to keep it for themselves. It would go to the power elite who would use it for themselves, and they would cure soldiers of their flesh wounds, send them back out into the field. They'd get torn up, they'd bring them back in, heal them up, and we'd instantly have a whole host of new problems, including, overpopulation. So no, they're not going to give us this technology. They know better than that. What they are doing is healing people on a limited basis, and what I found is a pattern, which is, not a super strong pattern, but certainly noticeable, that the people who are being healed are people who are doing what I would call good work for humanity. And this is people who are inventors, see this a lot, doctors, social workers, entertainers, police officers, this type of person, environmentalists. These are the types of people who are getting healed by ETs.
Well, let's talk about some of the specific cases that you researched yourself and go from the smallest healing, like a common cold, to the most extreme healing.
Well,
and walk us through how it happens, where it happens, and what race.
Right. Well, this slide here is I put up because I want to make a point that ETs make good doctors. This is the first thing that people describe when they're taken on board a UFO, how hospital-like it is, how very much like a hospital room, how it's very, being examined. They're very, very interested in the human body. And these ET healings seem to occur in 4 basic ways, through lights coming down. I also want to mention there's a lot of medical evidence. Medical evidence can make or break a case. For example, most abductees can point to some sort of scar on their body. This is a picture from Mike Evans, who woke up with many scars on his body as a result of his encounters. Some people can report implants being put in their body, and of course we know they're being removed. This is Louise Smith, Mona Stafford. This group of 3 ladies in Kentucky had a terrifying close encounter and ended up with radiation-type sickness. Denise Bishop here in England was struck by a beam of light from a UFO and had a laser burn diagnosis from this object. Stephen Michalek from Canada also had what appears to be radiation poisoning as a result of his close encounter. And some people, have the ultimate horrifying medical symptoms of death. This does happen. But on the other hand, we get these amazing healing cases, which occur in 4 basic scenarios. In people's homes, a good percentage of these people who are being healed have essentially a house visit by ETs. Others are taken on board and healed through surgical procedures, often lights, sometimes sounds. Pills are not uncommon. Also, just being in a close association with a UFO, a number of people have been healed while driving down the road as a UFO hovers over their car. And a certain percentage, about 10%, and this shocked me, of people who are being healed were actually healed in a hospital room. Now, I know how that sounds, but if you look into this subject, you'll know that encounters can occur everywhere. This is an actual case from Canada, where a nurse saw this UFO hovering right outside the hospital. And she could easily see right inside, saw the entities, it was right outside these windows here. So yeah, there are a number of cases where people are actually cured inside hospitals. Now I broke down, there's over 100 cures in this book that I wrote, which was some years ago. I'm going to say there's probably closer to 200 or 300 now. And one of the most common types is cures of flesh wounds. A very well-known case occurred to a police officer, actually, in Texas. They were driving down the road when they saw this giant UFO sent down this violet beam of light which struck one of the officers who had his arm outside the window. Now, it just so happens this officer was bitten by his son's baby pet alligator and had a wound on his finger. This beam of light comes down, he can feel it, it's tingling, it's hot, and they drive away scared, pull off into a diner to discuss what they saw. He says, "My finger's not hurting," pulls off the bandage. There is no trace of this cut, this wound. And this is a real case. This guy was interviewed by a major from Pease Air Force Base. The case was made the public media and was reproduced in many books. It's a well-known and pretty legitimate case, but one of only many, many cases like it. I found contactees and abductees being healed equally. Jerry Wills is a contactee. By contactee, I mean someone who's invited aboard by some human-like ETs who are friendly, as opposed to gray-type ETs.
They take you.
Right. Interestingly, he said he met this human-like ET who taught him all this stuff. He's an inventor, fits the pattern, and said he was healed of a feverish condition by actually, interestingly enough, gray-type ETs. So that's what I found is, lots of different types of ETs are doing this healing, but grays certainly figure pretty prominently.
You mentioned hospital abductions and healings. I think that's really fascinating because there are a lot of witnesses. What I've always been intrigued with is jails. People who have been taken from jails or prisons,
right,
locked in a cell with cellmates, guards, and thousands of other people. Do you know of any abductions that occurred from jails or prisons? And one step further, any healings that have happened in any of those? Because if you're talking about the good people being healed, all right, what about a convicted felon?
No, I don't have any cases of someone healed inside a prison. Not to say that doesn't happen, but who would you tell?
That's true.
I did write an article about UFOs hovering over prisons, and there are a number of cases like that. And there are cases where people have disappeared out of their hospital rooms. And mind you, there's one where the guy was strung up with instruments, full on, and they went into his room and he was gone. They're rushing through the hospital looking for him, go back to the room and he's back there, fully strung up back into all his, instruments. So yeah, they have the ability to do this if they want. I've got a number of cases where people were visited in hotels, the Marriott Hotel, 6th floor in Woodland Hills, very densely populated place. Yeah. New York City, condominium complexes. These guys can show up anywhere. It's not a problem.
Yeah. Like Linda Cortiel, they took her from the 9th floor You know, over 100
Right.
witnesses saw it on the Brooklyn Bridge, including apparently the UN Secretary General, whereas the 2 bodyguards came forward. If
Right.
only
Well,
he
that's
would come forward, that'd be nice.
Another clear demonstration, a publicity stunt is what I think that amounted to, because it's one of very few observed abductions. Most obviously aren't observed, but a certain percentage are. But you said the question earlier, which this baffles me, and I don't know how to explain this. Why would ETs come to cure someone of a common cold?
Yes.
Of a alligator bite on their finger?
And thinking they could heal themselves.
Right. There's not a whole lot of sense to it. This is an interesting case.
It just looks like a child drew it.
Well, he's not the greatest artist, is he? No.
Oh, okay. I don't know. I was just assuming it was a child, but
No,
okay.
he's not.
Guess I'm wrong.
Poor Daniel, no. He did his best.
Yeah.
But he was a contactee, he's had experiences, pretty regularly, and came down with this impacted wisdom tooth. And this is one of the very, very few cases I've got where someone actually asked their ET contacts for healing, and they did it.
Really?
Yeah, he was in the middle of an abduction. He telepathically says, I'm having this problem with my teeth. I'm like, oh, hold on a second. And they worked on it. Boom, his infection went away. So yeah, it's hard to say. Here's Leonard Stringfield. He investigated a case of a child in Kentucky, Chuck Doyle, who was suffering from this bad head cold. And Chuck Doyle's outside in his backyard, sees this UFO hovering over the neighbor's yard. It's hovering over the pool. It sends down a beam of light which starts playing across the field. It's coming towards Chuck. He turns to run because he realizes this beam of light is going to hit him. And it does hit him. And as soon as it hits him, he says it was being hit by a bucket of ice water. He was instantly paralyzed. All these weird symbols came into his head, strange landscapes, all this stuff. A lot of it went over his head, equations, and things like this. And eventually the beam retracted. He was stuck in a position where he was 45 degrees over the ground, fell down, hit his face, ran inside, said, "Mom!" She runs out, sees this UFO fly away. They did the right thing. They instantly called the doctor. Doctor came rushing over and examined the kid. See this little, cut on his nose where he fell. Not a sign of this really bad head cold. Gone. Instantly. I mean, that's a nice cure. These guys have an understanding of the electromagnetic spectrum that is far beyond ours. Why are ETs coming, I don't know how many light years to cure a kid, an 11-year-old, of a cold? Couldn't answer that.
There's a famous publisher, author, researcher that everyone knows as Timothy Green Beckley. You talked about before we came on that he had a healing case, right?
He investigated one.
Okay.
Yeah, and this was in New York to a columnist, Brandon Blackman, who was out in Prospect Park and observing this UFO with a number of other people. It came really close to him and his fiancée at one point, making them nervous. And I thought, wow, that's it. And as they went home, he's like, my car keys are missing. That's weird. My house keys, I mean. How am I supposed to get inside? Finally, he gets the spare key, gets inside. His house keys are now on the bed, sitting right in the center. He has this is something to do with his close-up sighting, because not only that, he had an injury on his hand, a cut. It was gone, healed, as apparently a result of just being next to this UFO. And as I said, every major researcher is coming up with these cases. Jacques Vallée, he's written a dozen books on UFOs. He has a very interesting case in France involving a doctor. Again, here's the pattern of people who's being healed and why. One guy who was healed was a broadcaster. They said, you're going to do very important work. Another guy was a UFO investigator. They said, we're healing you because you're going to help a lot of people. So this is why they're doing the healing. This doctor was woken up in the middle of the night. This is in France. Rushes into his son's bedroom because there's this light coming from it. He sees these 2 discs hovering outside the window. They merge into one, turns up, it flashes this beam of light right on him, strikes him in the face and chest. He's very dazed and dazzled and stumbles back into his room and falls asleep. Wakes up the next morning with this scar, this mark on his stomach, triangular mark. His son has an identical mark. But here's where it gets really interesting. This guy had an axe wound on his foot. He had cut it while chopping wood 2 days earlier and had a nasty gash. It was gone, healed completely. And not only that, he had an injury in the Algerian War. As a result of the Algerian War, he was left partially paralyzed. He was a professional piano player, had to give it up. As a result of being struck by this beam of light, his paralysis was gone. He could take up his piano playing again. So my point is these encounters are affecting people beneficially. Certainly a percentage of them, maybe not all, but a certain number of these cases are ETs coming in on healing missions.
Yeah, that was the next my question. The eye healing case you were talking about, is that what this drawing refers to?
Yeah, there are a number of eye healing cases. One was probably the best one is this Peruvian customs official. He went out on his veranda and saw this UFO pretty far up there, this tiny little disc, sends down this violet beam of light, really thin beam of light, which actually strikes him. And he's again dazed and kind of confused by what happened, rushes back inside and he's like, I can't see. Well, he had myopia, nearsightedness. He's like, takes off his glasses. He can see perfectly now. Instantly, his vision was cured. Pretty interesting. And not only that, he suffered from rheumatism. This wasn't cured instantly, but cured up in about a day or two.
Pretty fast.
That's, pretty darn fast.
Yeah.
So, number of cases of people who are cured not only of one condition, but, multiple.
What about the infertility case that you researched?
Right. These are more, here's the infertility case. Great case. Alan Godfrey is this police officer, who's won awards for investigations into murders, suffers this horrific injury in a fight where he, loses the ability to reproduce. He's no longer fertile. Can't have kids. The doctors say, sorry, it's over. He is called out to investigate a herd of missing cows. Very strange. He finds them in another place. It's impossible because the pen is already locked up. It's very strange, and comes upon this landed UFO. He's a police officer, a trained observer. He quickly pulls out his sketch pad, draws it, experiences a period of missing time. He made a big mistake. At this point, he reported his encounter officially. He got
Lost his job.
Pretty much. He got ridiculed mercilessly by his coworkers. The ridicule escalated to where his superiors were ridiculing him, asked him to resign. He refused. They took away his car and gave him a bicycle.
Poor guy.
So rude.
Poor guy.
I mean, seriously. And later on, he had another encounter. He woke up. There's this weird buzzing noise over his house. His wife hears it. They're running around looking for it. Can't find it. Next day, or not next day, but shortly later, his wife is pregnant. He thought she was sleeping around. She's like, no, I'm not, honest to God. And he goes back to the doctor. He's fertile again. His condition was reversed.
And it was an irreversible condition is what they told him, essentially.
Right.
We got a few minutes left. ILA said something major that I figured you should touch on because you investigated a case. Catalina, he showed you that picture with that giant, which of course was censored by the time it got to the museum.
Right.
You investigated 2 years ago this amazing case with the Boy Scouts, and I was hoping in the couple minutes we have you could talk about that real quick.
Yeah, I found this Catalina connection very interesting because I'm going to be lecturing on this for the MUFON conference in September about the possibility of an undersea base. This is a huge hot spot, and Catalina Island has got a number of encounters of every type, and one occurred last year on June 26th involving a group of Boy Scouts. This is a very interesting case because a number of these scouts saw it. No one's talking. I'm having a very difficult time, getting some new witnesses. This one Boy Scout did talk.
With his parents, thank God.
Yeah. He's very sincere, obviously sincere.
Yeah.
And he and his two friends noticed this light. And out of this, they're like, is this a planet? What is this? Out of this object, numerous other objects started to come out. And first it was, 10, then it was 20. They started counting them. It was 30, it was 40, it was 50, it was 100. It was over 100 objects. I know how that sounds. That's way too many, but I've got 4 or 5 cases involving hundreds and hundreds of these objects right in this area. Very interesting case. They tried to take pictures of it. Their cell phone cameras failed. Their cell phones failed. Their flashlights failed. Got another case on Catalina, same thing. They had cameras, they had radios, they had all this stuff. Every single electrical thing they had failed.
And one thing I find really interesting is when he drew the types of UFOs, he drew 8 different types. And I thought that was super fascinating.
This is another thing that really baffles me. If everyone was driving a Ford out there, it would be a lot easier to understand. But no, we've got every different type of vehicle out there. We have little round craft. He described giant freighter type craft, spheres, triangular shaped craft. It's very baffling. It's the same problem we have with the ETs. Let's face it, there's so many different types.
That's right. That's right.
I mean, the ET that's seen by this guy, Carl Higdon, who was cured of tubercular scar and kidney stones, he saw an ET with orange straw-like hair sticking straight out and pointy hands and otherwise humanoid. So you get all different types.
We sadly are out of time, so I wanted to give you the opportunity to say basically whatever you wanted.
Whatever I wanted. Oh, all right. Well, basically, what I'd like to say is, I don't think ETs are here to save us. I really don't. I don't think they're here to take over either. I think their behavior falls under the normal human umbrella. There are some good ones. There are some bad ones. I don't think they're going away anytime soon. I think what we're trending towards is open official contact. I cannot see it going any other way. And I think that's what we're going to see. That's what this big change is. We're going to be welcomed into the galactic family. We're not the only ones in this universe. It would be foolish to say that we are alone and we are the height of, creation. No, we're just one of many different people.
Agreed. Preston Dennett, everybody. Now, stay tuned because we are going to do our panel. So if anyone has those questions that I've been asking you to write throughout the event, now would be the time to bring them up. And should we invite our other guests? L.A. Marzulli and Richard Shaw, please join us on stage.